Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to make a longboard. This is an absolutely awesome project and something practical and fun that you can actually use. I really enjoyed this project. It challenged me at times, but it was so much fun to make and even more fun to ride. I hope you enjoy watching along with the build as much as I enjoyed making this project. Let's get going. Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how to turn this, which is a laminated bit of wood, into a longboard. Now, I've been wanting to do this project for a very long time and I've finally got around to doing it. So I've got here a piece of cherry, a piece of sapele and a piece of cherry, all glued and laminated up, ready to cut out. So let me show you the clips now of how I got this blank prepared, ready to cut into the desired shape. Let's get going. The first step with this project was to laminate all of the boards together. To do this, I just used some Gorilla Glue, put some glue on it, clamped it all together, and it was pretty much as simple as that. I did put some boards on the piece of wood just to help keep it flat, because you really don't want this to bow or cup, because that's going to affect how the longboard rides and it won't be great for it. But as you can see, I used an excessive amount of clamps and it really did work because it stayed perfectly flat and it all glued up really nicely with no excess glue that was really spilled out too much, and there was also no gaps from the glue, so I was really happy with how it all ended up gluing up. So here is the template which I've just made. I freehand cut this and traced it all out, just with a bit of paper, pen, tape measure, ruler, some tape and a lot of faffing about. But I got there in the end. I tried to look online to see if there was already a template, but I couldn't find something I was happy with. So I've gone with my own design and I really like it. It's a bit rough around the edges, as you can see, for example here, but that's fine because we're going to be refining that anyway. So I've managed to transfer my template onto the piece of wood now, and we're now going to get about cutting it. And as I said, it's quite rough around the edges, it's not very even, but that's fine because we're going to come round with it with a belt sander or something and we'll smooth it all over. So we're now going to cut out this board template that you can see here. Now you could do this with a jigsaw, a handsaw and some sanding or a file. There's many ways to do it. I'm going to do it on a bandsaw, but something like a jigsaw, you could probably get away with it maybe on a scroll saw if you're careful. But there are hundreds of ways to do this, so just because I'm using a bandsaw doesn't mean you have to. This project's really beginner friendly, to be honest. As long as you've got a couple of clamps and some way of cutting some wood, you can make this project quite nicely. Now I had these pieces of wood already machined to size for me, so I literally had to glue them together. You can of course machine them yourself, but I just chose custom sizes. The woods all come from Surrey Timbers, some really nice planks here. But I just got it all custom machined to the right thicknesses and sizes for me. It makes my life a hell of a lot easier. And then I've sanded the whole board down to 120 grit just to smooth over the glue lines and get it all ready. So let's cut it on the bandsaw. I then took the laminated boards onto the bandsaw and cut out the shape. In hindsight, it would have been much easier to have used a jigsaw here, as it would have left me with a much cleaner cut, because to be honest, using a bandsaw is good, but I don't find it quite as accurate for doing things like this. And yes, I've forgotten to put the blade guard down, which isn't particularly safe. Please don't do this if you're using a bandsaw, and my blade also needed tightening a little bit. But that's all fine, nothing happened, and I've realised for next time. And as you can see, I was just following the Sharpie line, just cutting it as clean as I possibly could. I think I was using a 6 teeth per inch, something like that blade, so it was quite fine, and I could get a fairly clean cut. So now we've marked out the template. It's quite rough at the moment, and you can see the rough sort of shape I'm going with here. This is the back, this is the front. I still need to remove some material here, but I haven't entirely decided how I'm going to do that front nose yet. So we're now going to take this to the disc sander and belt sander, and I'm going to clean up all of these edges, as the bandsaw didn't leave it completely smooth, because I'm not particularly accurate. The next stage of this project was to sand it all, and I used my Axminster 125 belt and disc sander here, and I had it connected to a Henry Hoover, so as you can see there was very minimal dust. Now I found this really good to clean up all the edges, and it left me with a fairly consistent shape. I did end up cleaning up a little bit more by hand using a hand plane, as you'll see later on, but I was pretty happy with the overall shape and finish. Now here you can see I'm just using my block plane just to create a much better shape, and it made it more even on both sides, which is really important for a longboard as you want it to ride very well. So we're now on to the part of the project that I'm most nervous about, and that's drilling the trucks into the longboard. Now I've got a pilot hole bit here, and I've got a bigger bit here for the bolts to go through, and I have a countersink bit. Hopefully, if this all goes to plan, we'll drill pilot hole, we'll drill a bigger hole, and then we'll countersink from the other side, screw through, bolt together, and that should be about it. Obviously I'm going to need to sand the whole board, but I want to get the trucks into their position, holes drilled through, so that I can then sand any tear out afterwards. So I wanted to see what the colours would look like, so I put a bit of oil on it. I know I'm going to have to sand it off. It was a dumb idea, but, you know, I wanted to see what it looks like. So we're going to drill the holes. So what I've done is I've spaced out my trucks where I roughly think they should be. I mean, there's no exact science to this, to be honest. It's just where you think. And we're just going to drill a hole. Try and get these straight. Luckily, by complete coincidence, the middle strip of sapele is the exact same size as the truck. And I promise you I didn't buy it with that intention. I have just thought it would make far more sense if I just put this on here and get a pen. I then drilled both the holes for both trucks and just took my time here. You really don't want to rush this, as this is probably the most important part of the whole longboard. After I drilled the holes, I then used a countersinking bit just to clean up the place where I would put the bolts through. So I've got the board clamped up and I've just taken the trucks off over there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sand up the edges. So I'm going to sand this. Sand the front profile up, sand it flat. It's about 20 past 6 at the moment, so I can make some noise for the time being. Can use the random orbit sander to do this, so it's going to be very, very noisy. I'm going to hook up the dust extraction, and we should have this done by about 7ish, the whole board sanded. That's the plan at least. Let's get cracking. The last stage of this project was sanding. Now, surprisingly, I actually really enjoy sanding with my Bauer random orbit sander. It's actually just quite a chilled out thing to do, to be honest. Just pop some music on or some YouTube and just get on with it. I really don't mind sanding, and I know a lot of people hate it and try to avoid it, but I'm not that fussed by it. I started out with a 120 grit disc just to remove some of the oil I'd put on earlier on, which just helped raise the grain in case the board got any water on it or anything like that when I'm riding it. So I sanded 120 grit, and it didn't really need to go much finer, but I ended up doing some more by hand. I went up from 120 all the way to 400, and then a 1500 grit, before eventually applying sealer and all of that stuff. And as you can see here, I just used a block plane to go round the edges, and then cleaned it up with some hand sandpaper. And that just created for a nice feel to the board, so that it wasn't sharp when you picked it up. And now you can see I applied some cellulose sanding sealer just to seal the wood, and then coated it with 1 or 2 coats of acrylic satin lacquer, and then I again applied about another 3 or 4 once they had had a good chance to dry. I really wanted to create a durable finish here, so I just added as many coats as possible. So the board's had 6 coats of lacquer, and I'm going to apply the 7th coat now. I might have already done 7, but it's had a lot more than it needs. The weird lines you can see here are just where I've just had my hand, but it looks really smooth, and I'm really, really happy with the overall finish. So we'll just take it down with a bit of 1500 grit again, and we'll put the final coat on. Really, really happy with it though. The final step before I could ride the board was applying a grip tape. Now this was a fairly quick thing to do. I just made sure the board was totally clean of dust, and then I applied the grip tape just by sticking it on. It's peel back, sticks on, it's really, really easy to do. And then once I'd stuck it on, I then used a very sharp Stanley knife just to go around the edges and remove all of the excess. I tried to hold the blade at about a 45-degree angle away from the workpiece, just to keep it from marking the wood. I then bolted the trucks back onto the board, and then it was all set up ready to ride. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to leave you with a few clips of me riding the longboard now. I've never ridden a longboard before, or a skateboard for that matter, so this was my first ever time on one, and I had an absolute blast. It was so much fun to ride, and my mate who rides longboards and skateboards a bit more than I do said it was good fun to ride as well. So I think all in all it was a pretty successful project, and I look forward to trying out more longboarding in the future.